So great to have you here. Thank you for coming out on, I'm sure, the end of a very busy week for you. My name is Christy Reyes. I am an ESL teacher in the non-credit program at Miracosta College, North San Diego County, and a facilitator for CalPro. I was involved in the original writing of the Motivation and Persistence for Adult Learners modules. It's a community of practice as well as an online course written back in 2018. And of course, many things have changed in our world since 2018. So we have recently revised those modules, and we're going to give you a little glimpse of some of the interspersing of distance or online education that has been included in that. I've been teaching hybrid even before the pandemic. I taught hybrid, meaning that my students came to class in person and then they did some online work. And I have a couple of certifications in online teaching. So that's where my experience was before the pandemic as well with online teaching. So this is our agenda for today. We're going to have very brief introductions. Get your fingers ready with sort of a large group. Unfortunately, we won't be able to do breakout rooms, and there is a lot to cover, but I will ask you to be active participants by responding in the chat quite a bit. So we are going to start with some introductions. I'll go over the objectives for this time that we have together. I think it's important to make sure that we have a common vernacular, if you will, when we're talking about distance ed. So I'm going to go over some of the definitions because in my experience, I've heard some of them used differently. So just to make sure that we're kind of on the same page with that. And then we're going to look a little bit at some of the research, the literature, what it has been said that are the key factors for student success in online learning. And then we're going to take it down to the real level, what we teachers can actually do to support student motivation and persistence in online learning. So with these original modules, there are 9 strategies. So we don't have time, obviously, to go in depth in all of the 9 strategies, but we're going to show you specifically for online learning little things that you could do within each of those 9 strategies. And then we'll have a wrap up, see if you have any questions, reflection, and evaluation. So at this time, could you, I see many of you are introducing yourself in the chat. So if you haven't yet, could you please do that? Tell us your agency and what you teach, and be a little bit specific if you can with that. Sometimes teachers put ABE 23, and I don't know what that means. So if you can be specific what you teach, if you are not in a teacher, if you're an administrator, if you can let us know that, or if you are office staff or anyone like that, wow, thank you so much for joining us. That's wonderful. Let us know that. And then the second question is, what is one strategy you have used with success to motivate students to persist in the recent past? So even if you are office staff, you do play an important role. If you're administration, you play an important role. So I'll give you just a minute or two. Thank you, everybody. Wow. See all of those answers rolling in. So if you can answer that second question too. Oh, I love it. My students feel free to make mistakes. That comfortable learning environment is so crucial for adults because we have egos, don't we? Attendance awards, rewarding instead of punishing, right? That is very important. Calling, praising, acknowledging growth. Oh, Greg, yeah, breaking down larger tasks into manageable little steps. Wonderful things that you're sharing there. Student of the week, certificates. Well, so you're going to have a big pat on the back with some of the things that you are already using some of the research proven best practices I can see. So you're going to say, yay, this is going to be a confirmation that you're doing many things well. But hopefully you're going to pick up at least one new thing you can try. Okay, so here are the objectives for today. Go ahead and please keep sharing in the chat. And I find that in professional development, PD, I learn as much from the presenter as I do from the other participants. So please, as you are listening, pay attention to the chat as well as best you can. So by the end of our short time together, hopefully you will be able to walk away with these objectives, that you'll be able to define the types of distance learning, that you will be able to recognize the dynamics that lead to student success in online courses, and that you will be able to apply 3 new strategies that you're not already using, because you are already using some really great strategies, I see. So, or activities in your online or distance education to motivate students and support their persistence. So first, here we have some definitions. So I've heard different, even ed tech people interpreting these differently. So I went back to the original definitions, and just so we're clear, blended learning is probably what we've all been doing ever since we had a computer in our classrooms. That is simply that students are learning via electronic and online media, as well as traditional face-to-face. So if we ever showed a video in the classroom, I remember the old VHS even, that was blended learning, right? So when we would have students go to the computer lab. So anything like that that has technology is blended learning. Now, how many of you have heard of flipped classroom? Can you type yes or no in the chat? If you are going to do any sort of hybrid teaching in the future, or if you're doing it now, it's simply homework. Okay. What this means is that you're having students do the type of things, the type of activities that they can do on their own, some of the reading, some of listening to your lectures, presenting new content, watching videos, maybe revising their writing, some of those individual activities that they don't need a teacher or classmates to be communicating with, homework they can do outside of class, so that when you are together, whether that is face-to-face in person, or these days synchronously in a video conferencing type of situation, a lot of us are using Zoom these days, right? You can maximize the time together with the students asking questions, confirming, understanding, clarifying with their teacher, and working together with their classmates. That's basically what that is. You know that distance education or distance learning is simply kind of an umbrella term, meaning that students and the instructor are separated either by space or geographically for the majority of the instructional period. So it's really the umbrella term, as I said. Hybrid, before the pandemic, for example, in the community colleges, that typically meant that students would come to the college and sit in a classroom some of the time and do some of the work asynchronously in a learning management system such as Canvas, used to be Blackboard, Google Classroom. I know LAUSD uses Schoology, one of those learning management systems. Nowadays, it's got multiple different variations, how that's being played out, right? Nowadays, some of our adult schools and our non-credit community college programs are doing that because of the remote instruction that we're offering. Maybe hybrid is face-to-face some of the time now, as well as some synchronous or asynchronous online work, or some other combination. So it's a combo sort of online and synchronous, asynchronous, or online, asynchronous, asynchronous, and in person. Fully online traditionally before the pandemic meant that a course would be offered 100% online asynchronous, and the teacher and students would never together. Well, that will probably change because I think students want to have that personal connection with their classmates and see their teacher. So I know at a lot of schools that were doing fully online before, it wasn't a lot of adult schools, that's for sure, but in the community colleges, some instructors would offer office hours online synchronously, but they said that sometimes students wouldn't even show up. But I think all of that has probably changed a lot. Now, how many of you have heard of high flex? Can you type yes or no in the chat? I love that, Alfonso. You're available even when your class is not meeting. Just, okay, so high flex, it has been around for quite a long time. A man, his last name is Beatty. He started this at a college in San Francisco quite a long time ago. And now some of our adult schools have started this even last April. And now more and more of the adult schools are rolling this out. But this is the maximum convenience service to the students. This is a way, probably the wave of the future. Personally, I think it's a lot of work for the teacher. Students can come in person to the classroom and be there with their fellow students and the teacher, and other students can join the class via the video conference tool. They have those options. I've even met an instructor in another state who the third option was students could just watch the recording of the class. So obviously, our students have seen the convenience of different modalities. So we need to, as agencies, work together with our administrators, our office staff, all of us, we need to work together and find out what works best for our students and offer what our students want and need. Because you know that students face a lot of barriers, transportation, childcare, all of that. And they have found that sometimes studying from home meets their needs, right? So online is the wave of the future. So we're going to look a little bit at what the research and literature says. And these are the key factors for student success in online learning. I don't think these things will surprise you one bit. So first of all, these are the top five. Top five factors to success in an online course. Satisfaction with the online learning. I don't think that's any different from our on-ground face-to-face learning. If students are satisfied, they keep coming. 2, a sense of belonging to a learning community. Personally, I think that's the same as face-to-face on-ground teaching too. Support, time management skills, and quality of interactions and feedback. Seems about the same as our in-person classes, doesn't it? Well, let's look a little bit more specifically at what the different research said. Well, as far as satisfaction with online learning, in one study, students who had graduated from an online program reported 92.3% satisfaction. That was not in the early days of online learning. Things have changed. Teachers have found out what works. Students still enrolled in a program reported 71.8% satisfaction. Students just beginning reported 57.7% satisfaction. And those who withdrew reported 20% satisfaction. So it looks like those who stuck around were the ones who were highly satisfied. So we're going to see how we can satisfy our students. A sense of belonging to a community, that we're so good at doing that in our on-ground face-to-face classes. We have become so good at that in adult education, but we have to do that equally well for online. So we're going to look at how we do that. 2 studies on resiliency indicated that students who are more adept in forming positive social relationships in the online environment will likely persist. Well, I don't know, not all of our students are super extroverted. They're not all going to jump into our learning management system and start conversations with fellow classmates. So it's incumbent upon us to set up activities to foster, right? Students with stronger social connections to peers will derive support and encouragement to persist. And this sense of a virtual community contributes significantly to student persistence. I mean, when you think about social networking, don't people who have never met before in their life have that sense of belonging to a community? So we kind of maybe take that idea of how that happens in Facebook, Instagram, whatever, and put that into our courses somehow, right? The third is obvious support, but what kind of support? There are many types of support. First of all, this is not always something we can influence ourselves as teachers, but emotional support from family, friends. The peer part we can do something about, but I'm sure you've noticed over the years, some of our students do not always have the support of their family. Okay, so that's a tough one to overcome. When students have a feeling of camaraderie within the classroom, that significantly contributes to persistence. Support from classmates and faculty are imperative to student persistence. So you see it's the human support, but of course, technical support. The perception of being unsupported is of an issue than the technical difficulty. So I'm sure, when we pivoted to remote instruction, if your school, your agency didn't have all those technical support set up, it did affect enrollment and persistence. I'm sure that you saw that until you were able to set up those supports. Okay, the fourth of the 5 top key factors to success: time management. Well, when students are regularly going to our classes in person, they see us and, hey, before you leave today, turn in your assignment. That kind of reminder is there. But when students are taking an online course, there's only a text reminder sometimes. So the flexibility of an online course is very attractive to students who are attempting to balance work and family demands, of course. And an asynchronous format allows control over one's schedule and coursework with less disruption to work and family schedules. So if a student is taking a course that they don't need to meet up in Zoom, they may be able to keep their work schedule, take care of their kids, and do their homework at midnight, right? And persistent students tend to have better study habits and complete work in a timely manner. So sometimes online learning is not for students who do not have those time management skills. So I think we have to teach them. We have to help them set deadlines, remind them of deadlines, and there are ways we can do that. And finally, this one's really, really important. Really important. If students turn in an assignment in your learning management system and it's just sitting there forever, that could be very demotivating. So quality of interactions and feedback that is constructive. So not just, hey, good job, or just a score, but that tells students what they did well and what they should work on for next time. So feedback that adds meaningful input into the learning is viewed as valuable by students, and it will contribute to their persistence. Of course, they want to be praised and know that they did a good job, but they also want to know how they can do better, and that will contribute to growth mindset, which we're going to look at in a minute. And ambiguity in content or communication can be difficult for the online student to process. I don't know, I teach ESL, and sometimes I send a message and I didn't really word it quite right. And I know this even happens with my colleagues who are native English speakers. So much can be lost in the meaning of text. So sometimes a little video or audio recording can help. But sometimes this ambiguity can be confusing, and it can increase the importance of quality interactions with faculty and other students when we are very clear. Okay. Other facilitators, scores and performance, self-efficacy, personal growth, and self-motivation. So that's what the research says. Well, what specifically can we do to take this research base and put that into our practice? Well, as I said, in 2018, we came up with these modules, an online course and a community of practice on motivation and persistence for the adult learner. And there's research that says these 9 strategies really do foster persistence and encourage motivation. And within these, we're going to look at each 9 very briefly as far as online teaching goes. So the first one, encouraging collaboration and cooperation. So before we even have students do that online, it's really important to set up some norms for collaborating and cooperating and communicating. So we set up some norms, of course, for our collaborative activities to ensure that students have an enriching online learning experience. And we need to have structured communication between the students. So to make sure that those student-to-student communications are respectful and appropriate, because sometimes the students never meet face-to-face, a best practice is to teach netiquette. How many of you do teach netiquette? Can you share yes or no in the chat? And how am I defining student persistence? So persistence means that they will stay in the course to the end. Retention means that they will stay in the program through all of your levels and complete the program of study. Yes. So let me look at the chat here. Okay, it looks like about half and half, yes and no. Well, I think it is important to teach netiquette. That's my personal. So you should, first of all, have some non-negotiables. So that means have some class norms for appropriate online communication and behavior that put your foot down, this is how it is. But then you can also have students give their input, because that will get them thinking about how they would want to be treated and how they want to communicate. And when students make the norms, they're more likely to stick to those norms and to those policies or rules, if you want to call them that. So it's really important. Online, when students start to communicate in a way that is not appropriate or is not following the norms of the class, that we intervene immediately and promptly and discreetly. And we need to make sure the student understands what they're doing, because sometimes this is new to them. Sometimes they don't realize, but we need to let them know that that's not appropriate. You need to stop that behavior, that type of communication online. You probably wouldn't say that face-to-face, so please don't do that in the online environment as well. So you can see here, this is sort of what I include in my syllabus. I tell students this. It's on the front page of my learning management system when they log in. And so you would probably want to change the wording for your audience, for your students. If it's low-level ESL, they may not need exactly this wording. If you're teaching adult secondary, a high school type of class, you would maybe add different things, right? But it's important to ensure that you get the student collaboration communication off to a good start with a common understanding of what's correct and what's appropriate. So as far as collaboration and cooperation online goes, I want to ask you, let me just ask you, first I want to say that it is crucial. It is really crucial to have students do things together online. How we do that takes some thought sometimes. We don't want it to be just a passive experience. Students log in and read something. That's not how we teach in our classes, is it? So think about this. We have to have students do some interaction. So online and remote students vary in their desired degree of community, and researchers also vary in how they define this. Yet across the board, action keeps students from feeling a sense of isolation that often leads them to withdraw and drop our classes. The research shows that online students learn more when they interact and participate more. And well-designed interaction improves student motivation, satisfaction, and achievement. We can help students develop a sense of belonging and keep them from feeling that sense of isolation, which diminishes persistence. It's not entirely possible to replicate online exactly 100% what we do in the four-walled classroom, because there's so many dynamics that happen when you're in a room with students, right? There's that spontaneous engagement that happens in in-person classes. So we have to work extra hard to get students interacting, given that this research says that interaction and cooperation and collaboration correlates with greater student persistence in online learning. So with that in mind, I want you to share in the chat, what do you have students do? What works for you or what has been working? And I see some of you jumped right in, thank you. Okay, breakout rooms, structured. Oh, I love this, Sarah. Thank you for pointing that out. So, you know, breakout rooms, just like when we used to be in the classroom, when you put students in groups and then, okay, activity finished, have them be accountable for their group work. Have a reporter when you come back together to report out to the group. That's a great idea. So I'll give you just another minute to answer this question in the chat. Okay. Now, as far as turning on the camera, it's an equity and inclusive issue. I know at my school, there are some students, honestly, in 2 years, I would pass that student on the street and I would not know that student because I never saw that student teaching synchronously on Zoom. However, there are several reasons probably why students don't turn on their cameras. You could show them how to put in a virtual background. But I had a student studying from her closet. I don't think she wanted us to see where she was studying. So there are many reasons, and I don't think it's appropriate probably for us to force students to turn on their cameras. I've read a couple of pieces about that. I love Padlet and Jamboard, great. Yes, we need to make sure that we give step-by-step clear instructions for before we send students to breakout rooms and so forth. And if you are teaching with Zoom, what I really like, it came out, 6 months or so ago, that you can share your screen to the breakout room as well, so they're all seeing the same thing, but you could always share a Google Doc that they're working on in their breakout rooms together, right? So here are some things. Breakout rooms, breakout rooms, breakout rooms. I'm going to show you some research in a moment. There's already research that has come from remote instruction that says breakout rooms are what we can do if we're teaching synchronously. As far as asynchronous, if you're using your learning management system or you're teaching a class where students never are meeting in Zoom or any video conferencing, start with an icebreaker of some sort. Have interviews. That could be written. It could be surveys, role plays, debates. Are you all familiar with jigsaw reading? Can you type yes or no in the chat? I probably don't have time to explain that today, but look it up. It works fantastically well. If you have a long reading, you can break it up and different groups are responsible for different sections. They answer questions and then they're reporting to different groups what that section of the reading was about. So it's really great for collaboration and sharing. Peer review, peer teaching, problem solving activities, case studies, group projects. What do you think? Do you like group projects? I get mixed opinions from teachers. I see a lot of yeses. Okay, so sometimes teachers say, well, doing all the work. It doesn't have to be that way. If it's structured in a way that everybody has a different role to play, and it's set up in a way that the project is so enticing and interesting and relevant to students' lives, it can work. Trust me, it worked in my class, okay? It can work. But projects are real life. Think about your own job outside of teaching, what you do in your work. You work with your colleagues on projects. Think of your home life. You work on projects. Projects are what we do in our real life. So it's perfect college and career preparations, soft skills building. And then it's really important to have in your learning management system structured discussion forums, which we're going to talk about, but also an open, unstructured discussion forum where students can come and ask a question, maybe related to the class, or maybe, hey, everybody, what's a good Mexican restaurant around here? You know, so that they can have communication with each other that's not just about the class. Because think about when you have your class in person, are they having conversations only about the content all the time? No, during the break, they're going outside maybe and having talks about, you know, their favorite movie. So why can't they do that in the learning management system as well? So if you have that open Q&A, that would be the place for that. Okay, the second strategy, how many of you are familiar with Carol Dweck's work? Can you type yes or no in the chat? She is a psychologist out of Stanford. Lots of, let's see here. Oh, no. Okay, so right after this, your homework for the weekend is to type in Google Carol Dweck TED Talk. Now, her research is with kids, but it applies to everybody, okay? So what she says, we're going to look at that in a minute, but her research is about people who have a fixed or growth mindset. And people who have a fixed mindset don't even want to try because they're so afraid of failing. They'd rather not even try. Okay, so they don't like to make mistakes. So they just say, I'm no good at this, I give up. You've probably had students like that. I know I have. We all have maybe parts of our personality, like we don't want to try that because it's too scary. People with a growth mindset say, okay, I failed this time, let me try it again. Okay, so this is really important that we help students see that mistakes and errors are a part of learning. So learners, as you can see on this slide, learners need to make a realistic assessment of their own knowledge. And the way that we can support this is by providing them with clear, specific, and accurate feedback. So take a minute just to think about this. What was the last piece of constructive feedback you gave to a student when he or she made an error? What did you say or do? And how did the student respond? And did the student use the feedback successfully? Why or why not? I saw a lot of you in the beginning. You said that you love to praise your students. I do too. Teaching ESL students, just to have them speak sometimes, it's like, oh, a victory. But we do need to give constructive feedback that will help them improve. So yes, so here's the deal. For online instruction, our feedback has to be timely. How do we define that? Well, that's going to be up to you. 2 weeks is not timely, but you need to set your schedule. What I like to do is because I teach some writing, and I like to give effective feedback on writing. I really want my students to finish my class being good writers and understanding the process. So I have my class set up so that they turn in the assignment on Sunday and I take Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to give them feedback so that by the following weekend, they can be revising. So think of your routine, because you probably be sitting at a computer all weekend. Maybe you do, I still do sometimes. So timely and effective feedback are crucial for distance education and online classes. Without feedback, if students just submit something, they will feel completely disconnected from the course, because students will miss the nuances of feedback, such as tone of voice and a friendly smile that we use when giving feedback in person. It's really important to think of how you can construct your feedback. And you need to curb that urge to look only for negatives. So when you're delivering the feedback online, you need to make sure you're giving fair and formative feedback with clear instructions to the student for how to improve. So start with a positive, yes, definitely. But then how can they improve? And here's the wonderful thing. You can put links to different resources where they can see how they can improve. So you might also want to consider other modes than just typing your feedback, such as recording your voice, because then they can hear the smile in your voice, or making a short video. That kind of feedback, there's research that shows that students really like that. And it's so much more personal than just reading something, and all that chance for miscommunication, misunderstanding is slightly diminished. As I said, some research shows positive results for feedback in online classes that is delivered via audio or video, because it can appear more supportive than text on a page. As I said, as for timeliness, think about how you set assignment due dates so that you can give yourself a reasonable window of time to provide valuable feedback to students on their work. Beyond good job, that's not enough. Our students put a lot of effort and time, and they deserve more than a good job, okay? So communicate to students when they can expect to receive your feedback, so that they're not just left wondering when, if ever, it will come. I just had an experience this past week. My students wrote these amazing narrative personal stories, and I had a very busy week. And they started emailing me because I didn't tell them when they could expect the feedback. They started emailing me the next day because, honestly, not so much that they wanted the feedback, they wanted me to read their writing because it was so powerful. They were so excited for me to read their work. So at the minimum, tell students, give me a week. Okay, give me a week, and in a week, I will give you feedback. Here's the thing about an LMS, a learning management system. If you are using quizzes, almost all of them have, I use Canvas, almost all of them have a way that you can put feedback on a correct or incorrect answer. Have you noticed that? So when students answer something incorrectly, you could put even, go back to your textbook page, and they can go back and review. And so you can refer them to an online source, a textbook, a website for answers that are wrong, and then you can say that, good job. So at least they're getting some feedback rather than just a number in the LMS for quizzes. Okay, so moving on. So about fostering a growth mindset. While creating an environment in which mistakes are accepted and understood to be part of the learning process, it's important that when we are correcting errors, to focus only on a certain type of error rather than pointing out every single error a student has made in a writing assignment, for example. How many of you do teach writing, by the way, if you can type yes or no in the chat? We probably have some math and CTE people. Yes, thank you. It's making mistakes is part of the learning process. Okay, so it looks like we have a lot of writing teachers. So if you're a writing teacher, you're probably like me. I love editing. Probably in a past life, I was an editor. But try not to, because it's very demotivating to get back a piece of written work and every single word has something marked wrong. Okay, this happened to me when I took my Spanish 100 class once. Oh my goodness, I thought I'm a failure. So be what needs to be corrected first. So CalPro does have some modules on teaching writing. I recommend, for the coming school year, but exhaustive feedback on errors can overwhelm the student, discourage the student. So instead, why don't we do this for students? I think I forgot here. Yes, focus on a certain type of error. And we can say this to students. When you correct an error, your brain is constructing new wiring to lead you to make a better choice next time. Making a mistake can actually benefit you if you persist and figure out what went wrong and learn from it. So maybe instead of correcting the student, this could be a collaborative activity. Have students find the errors together and correct together. They usually can do that. It's amazing how they can do that. Or just point out, in this line, you have 2 errors, try to find them, but they don't really learn from us correcting them. They learn from mini lessons based on general errors the whole class tends to be making, okay? So what else can we do? Another way we can help students manage errors is to focus on the strategy for solving a problem or answering a question rather than on the answer. Problem solving and analyzing where they went wrong are skills that students will be able to use in other subjects and in other areas of their lives. So I mentioned Carol Dweck. Her famous book is called Mindset, The New Psychology of Success. So she mentions in her book and her TED Talk on her research that focusing on teaching the strategy and rewarding it is the way to go. She says that we need to help students focus on process, not product. And when students are not quite, producing at the level we want them to produce yet, the key word is to tell them, you're doing a good job. Tell me about your process. You're not quite there yet. That's the way that we can give feedback. So it's process over product. What else can we do? We can challenge our students. Tell our students that they will learn when they have to work hard, when the content is challenging. That's when they really learn. My students sometimes say, oh, this is so hard, I think I need to go down a level. I said, no, this is perfect. If you are being challenged, this is the right class for you. If it were right at your level, you wouldn't be learning anything, right? And you can tell your students that we really learn when we need to struggle a little with new content. And we learn to persist with hard challenges by having hard challenges. And finally, you've probably heard about differentiating the instruction. That's a little work for us teachers, but what we can do is if we see that we have a student who is a little bit higher level, we can provide a more challenging version of an assignment for some of those more advanced students, or for our lower level students, so they don't get frustrated and give up. We can use our LMS. We can use it to our advantage by differentiating instruction because we can put things there that students can take more time with and review at their own pace. We can provide supplemental resources and exercises for students who may need those. And also, because the exercises students do in the learning management system give them their individual results in a way that their performance is not obvious to the entire class, they can't compare with others like they can when we are face-to-face. You know how they're always comparing with their classmates? Well, when you're in the online environment in the learning management system, asynchronous, you're doing an activity in Canvas or Moodle or Schoology, they can't compare with others, right? So that supports what's called mastery over performance goals. And last, it would probably even be helpful for your students to take an assessment about their own mindset. You can do a search online for growth mindset assessment. I did this with my class once and they wrote about their mindset. It was really interesting. So you could provide them with a list of things to try in order to maintain or gain a growth mindset. Next to me in my home office, Carol Dweck's book. It's great for parents, teachers. It has so many great tips. So not that I'm trying to sell her book, but I really learned a lot from reading that book about growth mindset. Next, we have specific literacy and learning strategies. You already mentioned a lot of these, so I don't think we have to go very far into this. There are certain things we do when we're teaching reading that we won't mention right here. That's part of the larger CalPro offering on motivation and persistence. But for the online teaching part, scaffolding. Can you share in the chat what that means, scaffolding? Some of you already defined it earlier and you said that you do this, at least 2 of you I noticed in the chat. How do you define scaffolding? I love that, Michael. Always have a positive attitude. And you know, sometimes when we make mistakes in front of students, that's a great, it's an excellent opportunity for us to model how to deal with mistakes. So instead, oh, I'm terrible at this, I give up. Instead, say, oh, you guys, I'm so sorry. This didn't work out right. Let me try it again tomorrow. Modeling that growth mindset. Okay, all right. All right, love it. Thank you, Greg. Providing sequential supports. Yes, perfect. Training wheels. That's a great metaphor, Suzanne. Thank you. Yes. So some of you said this at the beginning, that this is what you do to help students persist. So yes, something that can overwhelm or frustrate students and can have negative effects on motivation and persistence is when we give them a very complex assignment with no scaffolding. So whether you're teaching in person or in person with some online component or fully online, however your modality is, we need to carefully plan our class activities so that they're structured in a way that our class activities and our teaching and what students are doing goes from students demonstrating foundational concepts and understanding of that before progressing to the more complex processes. That will give them a better chance of success. So we can't go from point A to D. We have to make sure that they understand A well before we can go to B, basically, right? Training wheels, as you said. So how can we do this? Well, when you're using your learning management system, you can offer students frequent opportunities for success, and that feeling of success raises their sense of self-efficacy. How do you do that? Low stakes tasks. And in these low stakes tasks, they work towards more complex and higher stakes assignments. This corresponds to Bandera's self-efficacy theory. So when we have repeated, albeit small successes, This will feed students' belief in their ability to succeed. So scaffolding the content in a course that uses a learning management system, you can have settings in your course modules, for example, for conditional release of items. So students can't jump from one activity to the end, for example. They have to do this activity before they can go to the next activity. If you're using the course, the learning management system, that would be one thing you could do. So that ensures they've mastered A before they can go to B. Other strategies that support students' literacy and study skills development include providing opportunities for peer feedback, collaboration, we've already talked about, problem-solving activities, projects. We can also help students to build their metacognition by having them monitor their comprehension, performance, and use of learning strategies. We should teach the writing process if you teach writing, and have students revise their writing based on feedback and have students reflect. I don't know how often you do that. I have started to do that more and more because the research says it's so important to have students unit. So that could be a short survey, a sentence or a paragraph about their learning and their process and what they learned and what they need to work on next. Exit tickets, you can do that through a variety of means. I saw someone's put in the chat earlier, Padlet, Jamboard. It could be a Google form or something, right? A 1-minute paper. I don't know if you've ever heard that in the literature. It could be an audio or voice recording in which students describe the process for studying for that assignment, what they did well, and what they will work on for next time. So that reflection piece, I think, I don't know, I'm guilty of it. I skip it, but it's really, really important to have students think about their learning. And maybe if they didn't do well, they can think about why they didn't do well. It could have been that time management piece that's so important. So next we have use of assessment results. Okay, so here, this really goes along with literacy and learning. So this focuses on how really using, I guess for most of us, we think of CASAS tests, right? But not just that, not just CASAS tests. So the best practices go, I'm going to share with you in a moment, but I want to ask you, when you have students take a standardized test like CASAS, for example, how do you share the results with them? How do you share assignment scores with your students? And what do students do with that information? So when you have the CASAS test score, do you give it to them on a piece of paper? Do you just put it in the grade book, in the learning management system? How do you share that? How do you share test results with students? Not getting a lot of takers on one-to-one, because performance over mastery. I remember that I would, when we were face-to-face, I would write the CASAS pre and post test score, and we have also binders where students are supposed to record their CASAS pre and post test scores themselves to track their own progress. So I would write their post test score on a little Post-it piece of paper and say, this is just for you. I'm happy your score went up, or look, your score stayed the same. It's okay. That's fine. These things, it's not that, earth shattering. It's not that important. Stayed the same, or your score did drop a little bit, but don't worry. It's your skills are strong in the other areas. I've seen growth in your comprehension of listening, for example. So don't worry, but I'm going to look at what I can do better myself. So what would be the first thing they do? What did you get? What did you get? They always want to know what everybody else got. And I had these one students, they must have memorized that CASAS test because they were like, what did you put for number 38? It was so funny. So anyway, let me see what we have here in the chat. I love that. Personally via Canvas and follow up one-to-one meetings. Carolyn, that is wonderful. And then share the general results for the class. And you know, CASAS test, for example, I think I know that in the past I've used it wrong. It's supposed to be about our teaching. It's not supposed to be so much about the student rewarding or punishing the student, but students tend to take it that way. So best practices, exactly, provide the assessment results privately. Second, encourage students to focus on effort and improvement. It's just a number. Compare their scores with their previous scores. So this would be a good activity for them to do. If you're not face-to-face, maybe you could teach them how to keep a spreadsheet on Excel or Google Sheets or something, or send them a document where they could print out and keep track of their scores, but keeping track of their own scores over time and not comparing with the class average necessarily. So you're focusing on mastery goals over performance goals. Well, it's not always possible, but when possible, allow students to complete the assessment again if you feel that the score doesn't accurately reflect their ability. And we know with CASAS, this happens, there's usually a little diamond or something if something's not right. So usually that does happen anyway. And as I already mentioned, have students chart their test results over time. So on this last point, again, your learning management system can be used to your advantage. This is where we can provide ample practice for our students. You can set your quizzes to allow retakes if students' initial score is not quite where it should be. And you can choose a setting for the highest or last score to be kept, promoting mastery learning. So this is what I do with all of the quizzes that I have my students do in Canvas. They're all set so that the students should get 100%. In other words, to be taken again and again, because I don't want them to just be satisfied with 70% or less. I want them to get 100%. So I read some research that said that when students just take a quiz and they get 70%, and there's no opportunity to review what they got wrong, they're remembering 30% incorrectly. So I encourage my students to go back and look at the ones they got wrong, ask me if they don't understand why they got it wrong, and to take the quiz repeatedly until they have 100%. So quizzes are not the only way we have students demonstrate their learning, of course, but they can help with that foundational learning. So the scaffolding, making sure that they understood the lower level parts before we go on to the more complex issues. And also low stakes quizzes are an effective tool because of the testing effect. Have you ever heard of the testing effect? Can you type yes or no in the chat? Okay, so let me see if I have the book right here. I'll have to get it at the end, but the book is really great. Can't think of the title right now, but the book is from 2015, and the testing effect means that active retrieval, going back and remembering and drawing from your memory certain things that you've been taught, helps strengthen the neurons in the brain. In other words, you're going to remember better. So those little quizzes just like flashcards or anything like that, will help the student remember. So regular testing interrupts forgetting. In other words, regular testing helps the student recalibrate their understanding of what they do and do not know. So that can, in turn, improve study skills. I read an article in Edutopia about a research that was done recently that says that there is proof that having students take a pre-test on some content before you even teach that content will help students focus, because it will make them curious about what they got wrong. Like, why did I get that wrong? Now I want to learn about that. So that was an interesting piece of research that I read as well. As students see that they can learn and improve through effortful practice, and again, this is from Carol Dweck, their growth mindset is boosted. As students begin to experience repeated successes, their sense of self-efficacy increases. Also, research tells us that students who take those pre-tests I just mentioned perform better because they become aware of what they need to work on. When students are aware of their errors before a learning unit, this sparks their curiosity, motivating them to search to correct their errors when learning the new material. So that's something I'm going to try in the future. A pre-test before I teach anything. And it might save some time. Hey, I might find out that students know a lot. So that's. Let me ask you about this one. This hurts, doesn't it? What do you do when a student's assessment result goes down? Can you share in the chat? What do you say? What do you do? Okay. Yeah. I like that. Ask them. Yes, ask them. So exactly, we can tell the student that tests and assignments do not assess their true total ability or potential. We can point out their other class assignments and other assessment results. We can help them compare their abilities at the current time compared with those at the beginning of the class. We can explain to the student that many factors may have come into play, like adequate sleep, personal problems, being distracted, test phobia. All of those things can affect performance on a test. And you could, with your TOPS Pro classes person, you could request an individual skills profile from the CASAS test, if that's the test that we are talking about, and show the student which areas he or she needs to work on. And you could provide in the learning management system some supplemental practice in those particular skills. And finally, we need to teach our students study skills and test taking strategies, because they don't always come into our classes with that. So moving on, this is probably the most important thing that is in all the research that I've read. It is about helping students set goals. Please share in the chat. How does your program help students set personal goals? And how about you? If you are a teacher, how do you help your students set goals? So give you just a moment. Oh, love it. Okay. It's part of your mission statement. Okay, so go ahead, a vision board. I love it. So please continue in the chat. I'm going to go on. We know that having our students set goals is important, but how can we help them set their goals? They often need guidance. A lot of our students do not have experience with goal setting. So we need to take them through the steps to help them identify their goals, identify the benefits and barriers of and to reaching their goals, and ways to overcome those barriers. We need to help them write a goal plan and analyze the gap between their goal and their current status, and break down the goal into little steps. and help them evaluate and give time in our class or a conference with them to go over their goals and maybe revise and look at their process. So you've probably heard of SMART goals. What does S stand for? Let's see who has the fastest fingers. Yes, specific. How about M? Measurable. How about A? Oh my gosh, you're jumping ahead. Yes. And how about A? Achievable or attainable. Yes. And how about R? Realistic. And how about, and I think somebody already jumped ahead to the T, time bound. So yes, we need to have students set SMART goals. So you can search online or come up with a way and samples, but you really need to take some class time for this. So it doesn't have to be a long-term goal. It could be a goal for your specific class. But when students take the time to write down a goal for your class and you give time and you maybe even have a one-to-one with students for just a couple minutes here and there to go over their goal plans, then there is this reason to keep coming. I want to achieve this goal. So it's very important to include that. Next, we have finding value in learning. Value is defined as a learner's belief that a domain or task is enjoyable because it is intrinsically interesting, useful, and important to their identification or sense of. So this is really a fundamental way to ensure that our students are being motivated and to help them persist is making sure that they see value in what we're providing them. In other words, they must clearly see the benefit of the class activities to fully engage. So with that, you know that our students have many, many roles. They have many demands on their time outside of our classes, their parents, their employees, they are community members, and the time they need to spend in those roles competes with the time that they need to spend in our classes. So if students don't find value in the instruction we provide, the time they need for their other roles often takes precedence. You've probably heard this saying that adult students vote with their feet. That means that if students don't see clear value in their instruction, they typically stop attending. So it's important that students understand the value of the activities and assignments they do in class. It's vital for students to continue persisting in our classes, because if a class has low or unclear value, students won't feel motivated to come to class, and then the persistence will suffer overall. So how do we ensure that our instruction meets students' needs and goals? Well, we need to really get to know our students very well. We need to find out what their goals are. We need to diagnose what their needs are, and we need to make better decisions about how and what we teach in order for instruction to fill those gaps between where the students are now and where they want to be. Also, relationships that students have with the teacher are very motivating. So we need to create community in our classrooms. We talked about that earlier. That's the environment in which students feel that it's okay to make mistakes, the environment where they feel respected for what they know, where they feel they're equally valued, and even going further, they need to be active participants in that community. There are many activities or techniques that we can use to get to know our students' interests, needs, and goals. And that information should then be used to ensure that what we are teaching has value for our students. So how we do that? With those goal statements and revisiting, asking students for feedback along the way. How's the class going? Are you learning what you need to be learning? Is there something more that you would like from the class? They love that, let me tell you. Okay. And how do we ensure that students see the value of our instruction? Just last night, I had my class and I was teaching something and I asked them, did you know this before you came to class today? And they said no. And I said, see, it's a good thing you came to class today. You learned something new, all right? So when it's possible, we can include students in crafting our lessons by including them in decisions about topics, tasks, and purposes to ensure our course content is interesting and relevant. Then we need to be explicit when we explain to students that what they are doing in the class connects to their needs and goals. And we should also explain or show the connections between what the students are learning in the class and their lives outside of the class to make sure they see the relevancy to their lives. Okay, very briefly, addressing stereotypes. Have you heard of stereotype threat? Can you type yes or no in the chat? Stereotype threat. Okay, some of you have, some no. To be honest, a few years ago, I had not. Stereotype threat is defined as an individual's concern that others in the group will judge him or her by the dominant stereotype of that group. In education, there are stereotypes about the potential of learners' academic performance based on race, gender, and age. When a student is so concerned about being judged against a pre-existing belief about a group to which they belong, that stress that they feel about being judged interferes with their learning. So there are several things to do, and these come from the book called Whistling Vivaldi by Claude Steele. So make sure that we foster group conversation between members of different groups. So making sure when you have students do online discussions that you're mixing up the groups, you can do grouping with your discussions so that students see, okay, this person of another group is feeling the stereotype just like me. Oh, let's break down those barriers. We can also help students develop a narrative about the setting that explains their frustrations and projects belonging, positive engagement, and success through counterexamples, testimonials of students like those suffering the stereotype and so forth. So a quick example of that is I used to share a classroom with a math instructor, and he had this gigantic poster of all these women who were highly successful in math careers. And I wondered why that was there. And then I learned about stereotype threat. So counterexamples. Okay. Our course content also should include a broad range of diverse contributions to the subject matter. So if we're bringing in reading texts, make sure we have text written by authors of diverse backgrounds and perspectives. And if you're bringing in a particular topic, that it's not just lopsided, but you have multiple perspectives on each topic, that you have videos and case studies related to diversity, that you have class examples encompassing different races, ethnicities, sexual orientations, age groups, religions, and abilities. And finally, about graphic imagery. If you're using images in your learning management system, make sure that the images of the people reflect what your students look like as well. Next, we come to choice and autonomy. And this one is pretty clear, but how do we do this online? Well, results from an adult persistence project and other research shows that opportunities for students to be included in decision-making has a positive effect on persistence and motivation. Our classes can be more appealing and engaging when students have a chance to do what they think they are good at. How do you do that? Can you share in the chat? How do you give students choices or decisions about their learning? Go ahead and share in the chat. Okay, while you're typing, See some great things here. I'm going to keep typing, please. I'm going to go on. Well, one way is by providing choices for some of the class content and for the ways that students demonstrate their learning with different assignment options. So we could give students options for the way they demonstrate their learning. And when we do that, that increases their self-direction and engagement. In online learning too, learner agency is known to have a positive influence on student persistence. Our students may have certain modality preferences. I know for me, I can't watch a video. I'd rather read, but, and we can honor those preferences. So when we do that, students will be more motivated. The research in online education shows that giving students the ability to choose how they demonstrate their learning. Here's an example. We could have an assignment where they write a paragraph or essay, or they could create an animation or a piece of artwork with a paragraph or description, or a video or a digital story or a website or a song or an infographic. All those different choices. For the artistic student, they would love to be able to just demonstrate their learning that way, right? So all those different choices would really make it fun and intrinsically motivating. So students' ability to choose boosts engagement, achievement, and satisfaction, whereas instructor control undermines those outcomes. By showing students that individual differences are recognized and respected, teachers can create conditions in which students become more motivated, and great motivation can correlate with better persistence. Okay. We're almost done here with these 9 strategies. How's everybody doing? Thanks for your great participation in the chat. Our adult students come with many barriers. Can we solve them all? No. Can we give them resources? Yeah, we probably can refer them. Here are, no surprise, some of the persistence barriers in online learning: auditory learning style, lack of digital literacy, difficulty in accessing resources, isolation and decreased engagement, lack of computer accessibility, personal life barriers, poor communication. No big surprise there, right? Would you say, I was going to have you share in the chat, but would you say that these are what you have seen in the last couple of years as well? Is there anything you would add? Okay, I'm going to move on. So transportation, 100%. So what can we do? Well, I have about 5 minutes, so I'm going to go kind of fast. I will just say that maybe you've noticed, I usually notice I have 8-week terms, and week 5, it doesn't matter, online, wherever, my class attendance drops. So how about you? Is there a particular point in time when attendance drops in your classes? Well, a study in England found that attendance is steady at the 70% for the first 3 weeks, but by the 9th week, attendance had dropped to 57% in adult courses. This was out of the UK. So you can see the first 3 weeks are crucial. First 3 weeks, so important. But with online education, it's a lot different. We have to start before the class begins. That's called onboarding, because teaching online requires additional hand-holding and support. The interaction with your students, it can't start the day that the class starts. It has to start a week or so before, because when time is dedicated at the beginning of a course to building the relationships and giving adult students information about what they will learn, the expectations, and so forth, students are more likely to persist. And persistence strategies should begin, not the day the class begins for online classes, but much before. And students should get to know you somehow, whether that's a personal email, a video welcome, something like that. So these are all kinds of different onboarding activities. I'll pause for just a moment so you can look at that. And if you can share in the chat what you do for online classes, what do you do before the class begins to welcome students, let them know what your class is about, set some expectations. What do you do? Any of these, all of these, or something different? I'll pause for one moment right there. I love, and Marta, as much as I love sending emails, there's something about the personal phone call. There is something about that. And when in my classes, when students start showing irregular attendance, I can send them emails, texts, whatever, get nothing, but that phone call brings them back. Yes. Here's some more research. Once the course is started, we need to follow up. We need to have student-teacher interactions. That is crucial to include that regular contact with the students. It will foster that student motivation and involvement. And there is a correlation between frequent interaction with the instructor and student satisfaction. So you should have a predictable routine for when you're sending messages, announcements, emails, whatever it is, so that students know when to expect your messages coming. I've already mentioned that online activities should replicate as best as you can what you do on ground in the four-wall classroom, but the community building, the planned interactions, lots of student practice, timely feedback, student reflection, teacher to student, and student to student interaction. I love this quote. I'll pause for a moment so that you can read it. So this comes from a book on best practices in online learning. This is what we used to do face-to-face. We need to do the same online. So it's important to use icebreakers for students to get to know each other. Can you share in the chat an example of a digital icebreaker you use? And while you're sharing the chat, I'll go on because I have about 4 more minutes, but breakout rooms with conversation questions. And having students maybe record on a Google Doc or something like that could be one. The discussion forum in your LMS. And if you haven't had students post pictures and videos, that will really enliven the learning management discussions. So I recommend learning about that and sharing maybe a tutorial with your students, how they can put in pictures and videos. It kind of brings it to life instead of just text. Other tools, someone mentioned previously, Padlet. Flipgrid is wonderful for video, puts all the video in one place for you, where students could just make a little video with their phone. Shared Google slideshow, I like to do that. Or just have students make a video with their cell phone. Adobe Spark Video is a free and easy to use app, or Canva or other tool. So breaking the ice online is really important, just like it is on ground. So teacher to student, regular and effective communication is very important. So having that regularly, maybe at the beginning of the week or the end of the week, answering questions, sending words of encouragement and inspiration. And maybe you're studying a topic in class, you see something on the news, sending out a video or a news item. How many of you do texting with your students? Share in the chat, yes or no. There is a lot of research about the effectiveness of texting. One research study, this is just one, there have been several now, that it showed that with adults, multiple texts sent throughout the term with motivating messages to the students the result was that 36% fewer students dropped, and there was a 7% increase in average attendance. So Remind or Google Voice or one of those. In the learning management system I use, Canvas, there's something called Pronto, which is instant messaging. And then for having consistent communication, there's something called nudges. Are you familiar with that word? It's in the literature for online instruction, but this is when you start to see someone start to not be active. Right away, you intervene instead of sending a message to the whole class. Maybe it's that personalized phone call, but it is personalized messaging to students who are starting to drift away, to bring them back. But there are other ways that we can personalize and have consistent communication, as you see here. You know, when students send an email to you or text you, they probably want an instant reply. So maybe you are not able to give instant replies. So it's good to have a clear communication policy. So how you want them to contact you and how soon they can expect a response. So something like this that's in your learning management system and in your syllabus is a great idea. Finally, I think my time is just about up here. We need to have students interacting and communicating. I already mentioned about having structured and unstructured student-initiated interactions. It's a good idea to have a rubric for your discussion boards so they're very clear about what they need to do. Have models of language for what how you want them to respond. And be just the clearer that you are, the better, and a variety of modalities and tools. And I always participate. They have to be seeing you. So that's about teacher presence. As you can see, your active presence is itself a major motivating factor. So when you're teaching on ground in the classroom, you don't walk away and leave your students for hours, right? Same thing with your learning management system. Students need to see you there. So a picture, a video, they need to see you and you need to be active. So my time is up. Those are the 9 strategies. I hope you were able to walk away with one new idea. And if you are interested in a CalPro community of practice for an expansion of this, more like 3 hours, then do contact CalPro, free to WIOA served agencies and CAPE served agencies. Do you have any last minute questions? I think my time is up and I know Vicki needs to get on. Thank you so much for joining me. As you walk away, please just think of any of these. What's something you could take away from today? And please do fill out the evaluation. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Christy. And thank you everyone for joining us today. As Christy mentioned, the evaluation is posted in the chat. If everybody would be so kind as to complete that, we'd very much appreciate it. Thanks so much and enjoy the rest of your week. And hopefully we will see you soon. Have a good afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye.